Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This will be our, this is the second installment in this kind of info series regarding the level 4 exam. And so if you're just hitting this video for the first time and you haven't seen the previous one, I did a separate video regarding the writing component of the level 4 exam. So look for that link at our YouTube channel as well. And this is the second of 3. So this one will deal with the teaching component on the level 4 exam. And then my plan is to also have a third one for the instructor training or the pedagogy component. But just to recap, a couple of the things that I said in the first one, on this first page here of the level 4 course guide, I've added some text on top of it that links to the online course for the level 4. This is the online course that participants in the course portion are asked to complete. But if you're coming to the exam, it's really worth your time visiting either of these links here and completing that online course as well for the exams. It's a good info refresher, and we'll give you some of the most up-to-date info that we're looking for on the level 4. So I'm just going to scroll down to the evaluation page in the course guide here, which will be on page 7 or page 6, sorry. So this is, we're going to talk about the teaching evaluations here, which is the second component on the level 4 exam. So teaching evaluations, just the general overview is that, as it says here, candidates will be asked to teach one expert skill improvement lesson of approximately 60 minutes in duration, geared towards an expert level student. So that's a really important piece of information there to remember, is that you've got your teaching evaluation, which is expert level skill improvement. And you can contrast that with the one below it, which is the instructor training evaluation, which is an advanced instructor training session. So it's really important to remember the context of those two evaluations. One is in the context of a lesson, so you're teaching an advanced or expert student. The other one is in the context of a training session where you're teaching instructors. So obviously there are some things that you'll do different in a lesson than you'll do in a session. And so it's worth kind of reflecting as you're going through your training process here, and maybe running some practice lessons or practice sessions, but just start to identify what are some of those things that you might do different in a skill development lesson that you wouldn't do in a session, or vice versa. So, and then the next sentence here says the evaluator will direct or assign the lesson topic, including the terrain and number of students, and the teaching order of the group on the exam day. So with the teaching evaluation, it is a 60-minute lesson, or approximately 60-minute lesson. The assignment that you will be given really is just the terrain, as it says here. So terrain and number of students. So there is no assigned topic for these teachers for this lesson. The skill development that you choose to work on with your group should be relevant to what you see in the group, and it should be something that you feel the group that you're asked to teach could improve in their writing. So, but one thing that we will do is we will direct you, or the evaluation staff will direct you fairly specifically into the terrain that we would like you to teach in. So it may be, at the top of the terrain park. We may ask you to start teaching. We may be in the middle of a bump run. We may be on a groomer. So you should have a plan in place to be asked to teach in basically any terrain environment. One thing that we will avoid doing is asking you to start at the top of the chair and choose wherever you want to start. And that's just for the, that's just a kind of a factor of the evaluation here. It's an assessment, it's an exam. And so you should have a plan in place to start teaching regardless of where you're asked to start on the mountain. And then the next part, it says lessons will be marked by 2 evaluators, and the average mark will be used to establish the final mark. So new for this year, each evaluator will be assigning a mark out of 10 to the lesson. And then similar to the writing component, a 6 or better will form the meet standard, and a below 6 is a below standard. So in the marking evaluation system, or in the feedback that you get after the lesson, it's still just identified by meets or below standard. But in the notes, we will give you a number value as well, which is the average of the 2 numbers. And this is just an effort on our part to provide a little bit more clarity for you as you go through this process. And obviously the pass rate at the level 4 certification is low. It's a difficult standard. And one thing that we've experienced or seen over the years with many candidates is this feeling that a below standard means that you should throw that lesson out and never do it again, or or it was maybe way off of the standard, which often isn't the case. So the thinking here with assigning a number value is that it gives you a little bit more input into whether it was close and you had some couple things, small things to adjust, or whether it was quite far off from the standard. So if the number that you receive is a 5, obviously that's much different than if you receive a 2 or a 3. And again, on the other side of the standard as well, if you receive a 6, then it meets standard. But if you receive an 8 or a 9, then that gives you some pretty valuable feedback on as far as the success of the lesson as well. So as far as some of the specifics that we're looking for, and I will go down to the evaluation form in a second here, but basically the overall outcome that we're looking for is that the candidate teaches expert snowboarding in accordance with CASI techniques and methodologies. So the criteria here, just like all of our courses, is broken down according to our practical teaching skills of guest service and safety, communication, lesson structure, demonstrations, analysis and improvement, technical content, and then professionalism and people skills. If I had to sort of choose one area of sort of common faults or common pitfalls in this teach exam on the level 4 that we see people fall into often, is that my advice would be to remember the basics and the fundamentals of good teaching. And this goes right back to level 1. And this is why we use these practical teaching skills across all of our courses now from level 1 through to level 4. So often we'll see some of those basic elements of a good lesson being missed here at the level 4, like using the training cycle, and not respecting all parts of the training cycle. So not providing a demonstration, for example, or not providing a clear explanation. Often the ratios kind of get moved around a little bit here at these level 4, these expert lessons, where that 50% of student trial gets swapped out for maybe like 50% of explanation, 50% of the lesson being spent on explanations. So the quote that I always go back to, which I really think applies well for the level 4 or a level 4, a successful level 4 candidate, is that you really do the basics the best. And so the basics being just those foundational sort of teaching skills that we start introducing at the level 1. But some of the specifics here, as far as these teaching skills go, under guest service and safety, we can see creates a positive, safe, and student-centered learning environment. That should be familiar from all of our levels, right? Student-centered for a level 4 or for an expert student, obviously, involves some different things than for a beginner student. So that's where the change comes as we go from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Conveys confidence and enthusiastic leadership. So one of the things that we're looking for from you as a level 4 instructor is that you're confident teaching your peers and teaching people who are riding at or maybe even above your own riding level, and enthusiastic leadership there. Effectively uses terrain as a teaching tool. So really the level 4 certification and the teaching exams specifically, it's a refinement and even a creative variation level assessment. So we're looking for you to be able to apply those basics of good teaching and show that you've got a mastery of them to the point where you can start to add your own sort of variation to it. So using terrain as a teaching tool is a really important part of that. Being able to look around at what you've got available to you to work with on the run or the part of the mountain that we ask you to teach in, and start to incorporate that into your lesson. Employs a creative approach to teaching at this expert level. That really backs up the previous point there around adding some variation to your teaching, and paces the lesson to cater to high-level students. So this is one of those things that maybe differentiates a lesson from a session, an instructor training session, is that an expert rider who takes a lesson and wants to get better, they have a certain expectation around the pace and the mileage that they're going to get in the lesson, and the time that they spend riding versus the time that they spend maybe listening. So that's where that lesson pace comes in. Under communication and lesson structure, employs an effective lesson structure in relation to the student level and technical info being relayed. So we're expecting that you have a really refined knowledge around the methods of presentation, whether that's guided discovery, whole part whole, building block, and you're able to maybe combine those a little bit into the lesson structure that you choose to employ in your lesson. So it may be a bit of a hybrid model of maybe a whole part whole with a bit of a building block that forms the part, or maybe there's an aspect of guided discovery there. One of the teaching elements that we talk about at the level 4 course is the role of these 3 sort of outside factors when we're structuring our lesson around terrain, or where we choose to use, where on the mountain we choose to introduce certain things, the maneuvers or the what's, so the movements and the body parts that we're making, and then the development or the development of why. Does our student understand why we might want to make certain movements when we do on the mountain? And so this is all part of communication and lesson structure. And when we're teaching a lesson, we're trying to balance those three factors of where, what, and why, and we're trying to impart some knowledge across all three of those things. That's terrain, maneuver, and development, anytime we teach a good lesson. And then the second part effectively uses movement-based simple language to convey complex technical concepts. This is another area where communication might vary a little bit between a lesson and a session. And so one thing that you can really think about, particularly when you're running practice training sessions, pedagogy sessions, but there's sort of a pedagogy language that comes along with training instructors when we're teaching them how to teach. And those things are really not present in a lesson. When we're teaching a lesson, we're just relaying movements in a simple way at this level for advanced and expert snowboarders. Obviously, some of those concepts might be a little bit complex. And so what we're looking for from you is your ability to relay those complex ideas in a simple way. The next one is demos. Provides clear demos, and they're at the skill level of the student. And that sounds very simple, or it looks very simple when you read it, but it's one of those basics that really needs to be done well, especially at a lesson like this. So think about how you're providing those demos. Are you providing multiple angles for your students to watch from? Are you choosing terrain for your demos where your students can see the entire demo? Are you making changes to your lesson structure to ensure that the demonstrations are visible? And then are your demos highlighting the movements that you're relaying in your explanations? And is there a way that you can sort of reinforce that aspect of your demonstration and give us something to watch for example? So the communication and the demonstrations go hand in hand, and often it's just a matter of drawing attention to certain things within the demonstration so that all of the students are on the same page as to what you're trying to show. The next one is analysis and improvement, or the feedback aspect of the lesson. This one is probably, for me, is probably the most challenging part of an expert lesson, because you're looking at riders, like I said, who are riding maybe at your level, maybe even above your level, and you're pulling out some things that can help them and providing some improvements for them. So the first one is recognizes the technical causes of student difficulty. So that's the purely analysis. So are you able to see technical faults in your peers riding? And then are you able to sort of zero in on maybe what's causing those things? If you have a clear lesson goal set up and a clear problem to solve in your lesson, then this becomes much easier. So one thing that we often give feedback to candidates on with the analysis and improvement side is that it's really difficult to give feedback on an ambiguous goal. But if you set up a very specific outcome at the start of the lesson that you're trying to chase, either through the use of terrain or by exploring a specific movement at a certain point in the turn, all of the pieces after that fall into place. All of a sudden, your communication becomes much more concise because you have a specific goal to chase there. Your demonstrations become clearer because when you drop in to do a demo, there's something specific that we're looking for, that you're trying to show and that your students can look for. And when it comes to feedback or analyzing, when you watch your students, you have something specific to look for. Often we see with these expert lessons, it's a little bit too much of a shotgun approach, and it's like, we might be at the top of a bump run and it's like, ride down this run and try to feel something. And that's much too broad and much too open for anybody to feel anything. Riders at this level will always default to what they like to feel in their riding. So it's up to you to rein it in and be more specific to a specific change that you'd like to see in their riding. And that will really impact your ability to give good feedback. So the next part, positive, provides positive and relevant feedback. So this is a basic right from level 1, that we want that feedback to be constructive and positive, but it should be specific and it should be relevant to the goal that you've set up at the start. And then tactics, drills, and exercises should be relevant to the student trial and should help students improve. So really the decision-making factor on these lessons as to whether they're successful or not is, did you help your students improve? In that 60 minutes or in that time frame that you were allotted, were you able to change your students' riding and hopefully have them come out of that lesson being better snowboarders? And then the next part, technical content, effectively presents all technical concepts, consistent with CASI techniques and methodologies. So for me, this one, the second part there, consistent with CASI techniques and methodologies. often on these teaches in the level 4 and on the instructor training sessions sometimes as well, but often on these teaches, one of the common pitfalls that we see here with candidates is this feeling or this impression that you need to invent a new technical concept that nobody's ever heard of before. And really that's a huge gamble, and it's really not what we're looking for at this level. What we're looking for from you is that you have a refined mastery of the CASI technical content. And so often we get asked what sections of the reference guide should I study for the level 4? And really the answer is the whole reference guide. You should know the whole reference guide. And the general rule of thumb here for these lessons is if it's not present in our manual, in our reference guide, it's probably not a good kind of new idea to introduce in these lessons. We're not looking for you to reinvent the wheel. We're not looking for a new groundbreaking technical idea. We are looking for some creativity in maybe relaying some of the technical ideas that are already in place. But this idea of being consistent with CASI techniques and methodologies is really important. Show us that you have a really refined understanding of the stuff that we teach at all levels and that you can apply it to the highest level. And then the second part shows an understanding of the relationship between riding skill components and advanced riding competencies. So during the level 4 course, we spent a lot of time looking at those advanced riding competencies of strength and flow, arc to arc, loading and deflection, and steering versatility. And we spent a lot of time looking at the relationship between how the riding skills, and more specifically the skill components, impact those competencies. So it's really important for you to understand how to use the advanced competencies as, I sort of think of them as they form a compass point for your lessons. So earlier I spoke about setting a clear objective or a clear outcome or a problem to solve. Use those advanced competencies as that problem to solve. So maybe it's to develop more versatility in how we turn the board in ungroomed terrain. But beyond that, we're really looking for you to take a skill development approach, specific skill component development approach to achieving that riding competency or that riding outcome. So in that example of steering versatility, it may be, looking at the finer movements of angulation within the skill of edging that are going to help us to do this. We often also on these teaches talk about the use of a supporting skill or a secondary skill. And that's just a recognition that at this level, it's very rarely just a single movement or a single skill that's going to make things happen. And we often need to combine, for example, it may be angulation movements combined with some pivot or some pressuring movements or some unweighting at a certain point in the turn. So just showing that you understand the link between these things. And keep that in mind that those advanced riding competencies are just outcomes that we're chasing to make things simpler for you in your head to organize your lesson and for you to look for certain outcomes in your students' riding. And beyond that, we're looking for you to take a skill and movement-based approach to improving that in your students' riding. The last one here under the teaching component, professionalism and people skills. So demonstrates a personable, agreeable, and positive attitude. By this level, if you've gone through the process of being a professional snowboard instructor for enough years to be at the level 4 and level 4 exam, then hopefully this isn't a huge issue. Is presentable and professional in appearance. That's pretty self-explanatory as well. At this level, this is an internationally recognized certification, and presentable and professional in appearance, that would also extend to your equipment as well. So just recognizing the role that your equipment has in your ability to provide good demonstrations. That's a key part of being a professional here, a career snowboard instructor. Is credible, knowledgeable, and prepared at all times. So credibility comes from your ability to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk and back up your skills. Knowledgeable and prepared. So one aspect of being prepared with this teaching exam that I would really pass on from personal experience watching exams go on for many, many years now is when it comes to terrain choice. Just as an example, there's a lot of ways to be prepared and credible and knowledgeable in your teaching, but with terrain choice. So often for most people, you'll be completing your level 4 exam at a resort that's not your home resort. One thing that really kills the flow of your lesson is when you start to ask your students where you should go. What's over this rise? What is this run like? Is that run groomed? You're the instructor. And this is where one of those details where we kind of get some of those things that you would do in a lesson that maybe you wouldn't do in a session, but even in a session. And it relates to leadership and credibility and leadership in being in this instructor role. is know where you're going on the mountain. And if you don't know where you're going on the mountain, be adaptable, which is the last point here under professionalism and people skills demonstrates adaptability. Be adaptable enough and trust your teaching skills enough to know that if you come over a roller and the run is groomed and you thought it was bumpy, that you can still work it into your lesson. But stopping the flow of your lesson to ask the people in your lesson where you should go, or even worse, ask the evaluators where you should go, what run you should be on. That's a real success killer, actually. And if you're really in doubt, show up at the exam resort a couple days early. We also, we offer exam prep programs a couple days ahead of the exams this year that will give you a chance to ride with an evaluator and get to know the terrain a little bit. But do your homework and sort of know where you should be on the mountain. And if not, trust in your skills and trust in your own ability to adapt to the terrain that the mountain throws at you. So that's the sort of the detailed breakdown of the teaching. I'm just going to skip down to the evaluation form. And they're basically the same points mirrored in the evaluation form. And we do use the online marking system, but we have a copy of the evaluation form included here just so you can see. So each of them are still broken down by meets and below standard. Uses terrain as a teaching tool, positive, safe, student-centered, confident and enthusiastic leader, effective structure, movement-based, simple language, and clear demos, recognizes the causes of difficulty and provides relevant feedback. Effectively prevents technical concepts for technical content there. And then we have our professionalism and people skills parts at the bottom. So that's basically it for that one. Just a couple things to recap. So you're not assigned any skill assignments for your teachers. It's up to you what you work on. Hopefully, if you're following this technical concepts or technical content aspect here, hopefully that the technical info that you choose to improve in your lesson backs up an advanced competency or follows kind of an advanced competency outcome kind of base, and it uses skills and movements that are already in place in the CASI reference guide. And then know your terrain and know your terrain or be confident in your ability to adapt to terrain, and ensure that you're catering your lesson to a high level student or an expert level student when it comes to pacing and the mileage that you incorporate into your lesson. And then the last thing that I would say is just do those foundational fundamental things really well. So show us that you really understand these practical teaching skills of guest service and safety, communication and lesson structure, demos, ANI, and technical content. Show us that you really have a mastery of those basics and do those really, really well. And chances are your lesson will go fairly well. So that's it for the teaching component of the level 4. And that's chapter 2. Check in for the third part, which will deal with the instructor training part.